Creating your own reality. Is it possible for me? I am Jennifer K. Hill, the Consciousness Architect, and I am here to tell you that it's not only possible, it's closer than you might think. Welcome to the show. Hello, friends, and welcome back for another episode of Regarding Consciousness. I am your host, Jennifer K. Hill, host of this show and CEO of OptiMatch, Om.app, making connection more possible for every human being around the planet. And I'm so grateful to have here with us today Diego Ugalde, who is an ex-veteran Navy SEAL. Thank you so much for your service, Diego, and all of the incredible other veterans that you've worked with and that have served the United States and other countries around the world. And he is now an author as well as the CEO of the Trident Approach, where he harnesses all of the knowledge and wisdom that he gained as a Navy SEAL, along with using psychedelically led therapy in order to help other veterans and people heal as well. He recently wrote a book on the topic, and the book is called Leading from the Deep. And it's his story of being a retired Navy SEAL and how psychedelics helped elevate his journey. He's an elite coach, speaker, and is helping many people around the world. And I am so grateful. Quick shout out to our mutual friend, Justin Nahama, who brought us together today. So, Diego, when we spoke a while back and Justin had connected us, I was so inspired by your story. Could you start by sharing a little bit about your journey as a SEAL and how this has led you to being a prominent psychedelic expert and coach in the space?
Yes, I think that's probably going to last the whole. Yeah, so we'll cut it down. When I was in high school, I discovered that SEALs actually existed and everything they did, I was aligned with. And so as soon as I got out of the Navy, as soon as I got out of high school, I joined the Navy. And I found out later on that I failed the test that one needs to pass to even apply to be a SEAL. And so instead of going directly on to SEAL training, I had to spend 2 years in the regular Navy preparing to retake this test. I retook the test, I passed it, and then I took the physical screening test to enter, and I failed that twice. And then I finally made it. And then so after this 2-year-long saga, I finally made it to SEAL training. And I was there for 4 months. And I had the maturity level of about an 8-year-old maybe. And I was in the body of a 20-year-old, maturity level of an 8-year-old. And I failed every time to run. And my body was just not prepared to go through that level of training. And so my legs just started breaking. And one day, Friday before Hell Week, the instructors brought me into the office and said, "Hey, we really appreciate your time, but you're not welcome here. You got to leave." And so after all of that, I went home with my tail in between my legs on crutches and all of that. And I ended up becoming a medic with the Marines for a while. And then my enlistment contract for the military ended. And I joined the military to be a SEAL. I wasn't a SEAL, so I decided to just leave the military entirely. And then I became a civilian paramedic. And over the next 8 years, I had a minimum of 3 really terrible dreams a month of not making it through training. And one day I woke up after having one of these dreams. I'm like, the only way these things are going to end is if I go back. And so at the age of 29, I went back. The cool thing about that is the moment I decided to go back, those dreams ended. I had another 1.5 years of training that I needed to lose 70 pounds. I needed to do all this stuff, but those dreams stopped that moment. I never had another one of those dreams. So I went back. I separated my shoulder and herniated some discs, but I was able to make it through. And finally, at the age of 29, I made it through. I was an old man in the class. And then I made it to SEAL Team 2, and I served in Iraq, and I had a career collective, even with that first time in the military with about 20 years. And I ascended to the rank of senior chief petty officer and saved lives. I never had to take any lives. I mentored and was mentored by some of the most amazing people I'd ever known on earth. And this whole 30-year saga, this whole thing, I absolutely expected on the day that I retired to be standing on top of this mountain where confetti was coming down and fireworks were coming out of the ground and all this. And it was absolute silence. And it was just nothingness. I just felt nothingness somehow. And it was it didn't make any sense to me, because every time I had a conversation with somebody about my kind of life story, they're like, dude, only my life could be like your life. And I'm like, it's not that cool. And what I had recognized somehow, because I had no awareness of consciousness or spiritual connect, anything. I was just in this egoic, just whatever. But somehow I noticed standing there on the top of that mountain empty, that I recognized that everything I had pursued in was all external for me. Titles and qualifications and certifications and even medals and stuff, military medals. And I was like, there's got to be maybe I need to start looking inside. But I had no idea what that even meant. I literally did not know what that meant. So I just sat there with that notion without knowing what to do, where to go. There's certainly nobody I was hanging out with was saying the same thing. I didn't have friends in the mindfulness space. So I just went on with life, aimless, but still I was okay. I wasn't like I was miserable. It was just, nothing was enough, it seemed. And then when I retired from the military, we started the Trident Approach, which was our best attempt at answering the most common question we got when I was in the SEAL teams, which was, how is it that SEALs work and communicate so well together? Corporate executives would ask us that all the time. And so I thought, when I retire, I can do anything in the world I want. Why don't I start a company that answers that question in the way that I would answer it? And so we did. One of the things that I would add, though, it was that I felt like the SEAL teams could really handle some more emotional intelligence and connection to human. But you might be surprised, and not necessarily high on the pecking order of things to do in the SEAL teams. But so that's what the Trident Approach was at first. And we did like Navy SEAL training events on the beach. We did coaching, we did keynotes and all that. About a year into operation, one of my Pathfinders came to me and said, hey, Diego, I'm not coming into work next week. There's an organization, the Mission Within, that takes SEALs down to Mexico and treats their post-traumatic stress, TBI, addiction, and all that with psychedelics. And I was pretty shocked, because that was the first time in my life I'd ever heard of psychedelics being used in the context of mental health. But I didn't care, because I knew that he was smacked up pretty good with PTSD. He was addicted to Ambien. He had TBI, traumatic brain injury, all this stuff. I'm like, brother, you go do what you got to do. I can't wait to see you when you get back. So he left. The next week he came back, and he had a vibrancy to his eyes. He had a light to his smile. Even his skin color was different. We'd never seen before. We're like, bro, what happened?
I want some of that. Whatever you.
Yeah, what is that? How did your skin color change? How'd that happen? And I got no words, life changing. I got to introduce you to these people. So the next weekend I went down, I met with Dr. Martin Polanco, who heads up the Mission Within. He's like, why don't you come see what we're doing? These guys have been here since Friday. It's Sunday. You get to see them in the middle of they just did a medicine called Ibogaine. I didn't know what that was. And this morning they're all going to do a medicine called 5-MeO-DMT. Didn't know what that was. And I showed up. I literally saw him save the lives of my brothers right out from under my nose. I saw it happening. And I was like, what is this? And he's, hey man, we got another dose if you want. And I said, I don't have PTSD. I'm the luckiest person I know. All the time I spend in combat, like I don't have it. But I'm also not in the military. Nobody's going to test me for this, so I'm not getting in trouble. I do whatever I want. Let's do this. 5-MeO-DMT. I never did psychedelics before that. And I sat there on the mattress. He said some prayers to me, and I was surrounded by people that you know instantly that are just nothing but like love bombs. They're just nothing but love in the room. Beautiful music playing. The Pacific Ocean was right in front of me. And I took the medicine, and in an instant, I was gone. And because I didn't know anything about resistance, I didn't know anything. The medicine took me. I experienced everything that people talk about that they want to experience on 5-MeO. I got it all on the first day and the first hit. And I learned in an instant that everything I thought about who I was and the world around me and everything was all not real. I'd never known truth until that moment. And there was all this other stuff that came out. But anyway, when I came out, the first words that I could utter was, how can I help? And they're like, we are every weekend, and we got a waiting list over a year and a half long. So if you want to come down and support, we love to have you. So I went down as like a veteran. I speak the same kind of language thing. I've experienced what you did. but I wanted to do more. And I didn't even realize, I found out later that there was such a thing as a psychedelic integration coach. So when I found out about that, I'm like, oh man, I'm all in. So I went to go to school for that. I became that. And then I became a psychedelic integration coach for veterans going through psychedelics. And then about 2 years ago, Heroic Hearts Project called me up and they said, hey man, we'd love to have you come along. And I was like, I would love to. Heroic Hearts goes to Peru and they do ayahuasca. So I was like, I've never been to Peru and I've never done ayahuasca. And they said, what are you doing in September? I said, going to Peru, doing ayahuasca. Let's go. I went down there and people have different relationships with different medicines. For me, ayahuasca and psilocybin are just, it seem like family to me almost. And all the while, all this is going on and I'm coaching veterans and doing still the Trident Approach. We were training executives and athletes. And I just began to see all this connective tissue that psychedelics have with leadership. And so that is now what we've become with the Trident Approach is we share the best of what we learned in the SEAL teams, combined with our deepest insights from psychedelic medicine use and how to lead the self and elite teams. And I happily occupy those two lanes of being a veteran psychedelic support person and then also this coach for executive and athletes. And now we're also starting to coach mental health clinicians from our perspective of mental health and mental resiliency. And if I sat down with the pen and paper, I literally could not draw up anything cooler than I'm doing right now. So I'm having the best time ever. I love what I do. The impact that is being had is really all I need. And so now I finally know what it is to pursue inward. And that's all I do these days.
I couldn't agree more with you, Diego. It's such a beautiful journey. I only ever did my first true plant medicine journey about 3 years ago. And I do want to do a disclaimer. Please be thoughtful if you're considering this. Check with a medical professional. Be sure it's legal if you go to do it somewhere. I have to give everybody a disclaimer on that. And so like you, I went with a professional facilitator and it was a small group of 8 or 9 of us about 3 or 4 years ago. And I've struggled most of my life, Diego, with PTSD, with depression, growing up in an alcoholic abusive household and dealing with suicidal ideation. And so at some level, there was a happiness I'd experienced. And much like you, people would look at my life and say, oh, you have the life of the dreams. You've sold a company, you travel around the world. And yet my little deep, dark secret is there were times of crushing loneliness and crushing sadness and certainty. And what is the meaning of all of this existential crises, for lack of a better word? And I remember sitting there, and the psilocybin, I didn't even know what the medicine was. I was so just count me in, coach, tap me in. I just knew it was like time that I needed to evolve my consciousness. But I literally thought I was showing up to an ayahuasca ceremony, and it wound up being psilocybin. And I was like, cool, I'm down, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just with it. And the person we had was a master facilitator. And so there's only about 8 or 9 of us. And it was like a mixture of cacao and psilocybin. So these are all different plant derivatives. Psilocybin known as mushrooms. Ayahuasca is a Peruvian plant from the south jungles of Peru, which is what Diego is referring to. Ibogaine, please research carefully, can be used to help overcome addictions and PTSD as well as 5-MeO-DMT. There are many beautiful uses. So for me, it was psilocybin. And it was a mixture of that and cacao. And cacao is legal everywhere. And you can get really good, heart-opening, beautiful cacao. If you're like, hey, I'm curious what Diego and Jennifer are talking about right now. Cacao is something that you can find completely legally in a lot of places and what you ceremonial grade cacao, which can help us open our heart. So that was prepared for us with the psilocybin. And it was beautifully done. When we did it, Diego, we were hooked up to a vibrating vest that was to a 2-hour curated musical, intentional music and
Wow.
and then we were blind.
Mhm.
And as the medicine descended upon me, I meditate on people every day, and I like to keep people in my thoughts and prayers for health and happiness and soulmates and prosperity and all the things. And all of a sudden, Diego, as pure joy and bliss descended upon me, the first thing that occurred to me is I want to share this. And I sat there for most of the first 3 hours of this 5-hour ceremony. In psilocybin's case, it lasts about 5, 6 hours. And I was just in a state of ecstasy and bliss and was radiating this out, just going through my meditation list of the 100 or so people I meditate on, just sending it out through my heart, kind of vis-a-vis Care Bears. We grew up with the Care Bears. I was like, Care Bear share. When I got to the end of it, I will say I hit a new frequency. If you're familiar with David Hawkins' levels of consciousness, he talks about, he's written many powerful books like Power versus Force, Letting Go, two brilliant books. And he talks about the different levels of consciousness, just some of the lowest ones being guilt, shame, fear, anger. And then eventually we might evolve to courage or to rational thinking or to love. And I can actually look back at my life and see where I was on each of these scales of David Hawkins' levels of consciousness. And the moment that I finished that first ceremony, Diego, I hit a level of joy. And I'm so grateful, having struggled with depression for most of my adult life, to be able to have that as a new set point. Yes, you still have things happen. My dad just died, for crying out loud. My best friend and mentor, Dr. Mark Golston, who I've had on the show, passed away earlier this year, 2 months before my dad. So it doesn't mean that you don't go through moments of sadness. Though to your point, I think you highlighted this when you were meeting with the veterans in Mexico. Get a sense of resilience, a greater sense of self, that instead of looking outward for validation or proof or acknowledgement or acceptance, you find it hiding within your own heart. And when you get to that point, then all of a sudden, like the mycelium network of mushrooms that connects everything around the ground, you can connect to ideas, people, and things in a profound new way. So that was my experience. What was your first psilocybin experience like?
Well, I'm happy to tell you, but there's something that you mentioned that I love to talk about: post-traumatic stress and learning how to deal with these things, sometimes with the use of psychedelics. And what I've come to understand during my time in coaching and my own process is I don't think it's post-traumatic stress. I think it's pre-traumatic stress. I think it is when we understand who we are connected to our true self, or we have the ability to connect to true self, and we understand the mind for what it is and what it is not. Life is going to happen, as you mentioned. And when it does, and you are connected to self and you understand the mind, those things happen, and you're more or less baseline. You can be in a state of being unmoved, or just you go through your sadness, but then it ends and you're able to be resilient more quickly. And I think that happens with the preparation of the self. So it's, to me, when we as a culture experience things and we immediately go into this death spiral, I think it's because of the lack of preparation. And not big, it's just we don't know, but we have the opportunity to now know, so that we can prepare the self, the mind, and the body for life to just happen as it does, receive it as it is, move through it, and continue moving on. I'm hopeful one day that, if not plant medicine, just the understanding of elevated states of consciousness are maybe what is required for society as a whole to just see, so that they can be in this space no matter what happens. Yeah, there's sadness. We're human beings. That's a gift, really. Anger, it's a gift. But using them as a tools, not as, well, I'm sad for the rest of my life, I'm angry for the rest of my life, I'm just an angry person. It's no. Anyway, my gosh, my first psilocybin experience. This is where I learned very powerfully that the medicine teaches in metaphors a lot. And so the first time I did psilocybin, I had done 5-MeO a few times and I had done Ibogaine a few times. So I felt like I understood the neighborhood of psychedelic, which not even close. But anyway, we did 2 grams, and I don't even think I had any intentions, to be honest with you, setting sort of a general direction in which I'd be curious to see where the ceremony goes for myself. I didn't even do that. I think I was just like, okay, here we go. But it was very much done in like a ceremonial way. I hadn't done psychedelics up to that point for any recreational stuff. It was all just healing. So I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with this, your dad never wanted you. And I was like, oh, that explains everything, because my dad never understood me. He grew up in a very poor family in Mexico City. He was very quiet into himself. And then he has this son that is this little boy that's just like exploding all over the world, like sunshine and craziness and happiness and doing all kinds of unexplainable little boy stuff. Why would you do that? I don't know. Anyway, he never really understood me. And there were many things along the way where it was just consistent, but I knew he always loved me. I knew it, but it wasn't the love that I wanted back at that age. I didn't know what I know now, but I didn't want to be loved in the way that he was loving me. I wanted it to be different. But when the medicine said that, like literally everything, almost, you can almost see like a puzzle just coming in piles and all of a sudden coming together. I just started deeply crying, just tears and tears. And the medicine said, "You want to know truth?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I would rather know than not know." So just bring it all kind of thing. And then about a month or so later, I was on the phone with my mom. They got divorced when I was really young. I was like, "Hey mom, I figured out something." And she's, "What?" I was like, "Dad never wanted me." And she started laughing with this, like she had been smoking for 90 years straight. She just could, she was like that kind of thing. And I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And when she could finally breathe, she was like, "That man has loved you since before you were born. What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Yeah, hold on. Wait a minute. He has loved me. Hold on a second." And it was in that moment that I realized, yeah, he didn't love me the way I wanted to be loved, but he loved me. My mom left us when we were little. So everything, food, clothes, roof, everything. And I just got like this immediate download of, your dad loves you, man. What else do you want, kind of thing. He loves you so much that you are like his polar opposite, and he will never let anything in the world harm you. He would protect you to the day. He would die for you. And immediately got it. But I was angry at the medicine. I was like, "How could you tell me something like that? How could you make me believe something so terrible?" But I wasn't on the medicine, but I could imagine the medicine just shrugging its shoulders. But now I'm like, "Don't you think?" And so that was that was just 2 grams of psilocybin, which is a little, it's not a tremendous. There sounds like your audience isn't, maybe, so I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, that's when I really learned, because at the time, I'm telling you, Jennifer, at the time, I felt there could be nothing that was more true than that. It lined everything up. And even those things under the medicine don't necessarily have to be true. That's what integration is for. What I did by having that conversation with my mom and having that kind of realization that's closer to the truth, that is integration. That's the importance of integration. Not just, "Oh, I did, now I know." Not that. It's just, yeah, that was my first psilocybin experience.
Think if I'm remembering correctly, I think psilocybin's the one that my husband calls a trickster. See, I love it.
100%.
And
Mhm.
it's everything in life is an illusion. And we really get down to the bottom of it. I remember one of my old teachers, Kabbalah, years ago said to me, "Jen, everything either comes from love or fear." And I'd be curious to know what would happen if you had even set an intention. Because for me, if and when I do plant medicine, which is normally 2 to 3 times a year, I sit with it and I hold it and I talk to it as though it's a dear friend. And I just say, "I need your help. I could really use some wisdom, some openness, some insight, some play, some fun, whatever." And I ask it as though it's a therapist, a dear friend, whatever I need emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And I have a conversation with it. And then I find that in my experiences that I've had with ayahuasca and psilocybin and certain other plant medicines, that for me, then I'm able to dance with the medicine and be in harmony with it. Where sometimes, like my husband was just saying, you can have the experience in ayahuasca. People will certainly share this, that like trickster and the shadow and illusion. I've been very lucky in the 8 or 9 ayahuasca journeys I've done. Knock on wood, like no darkness. It's all just been pure light and love, etc. But I think that's because that's how I enter with the medicine, as I go into the experience and partnership with the medicine. And then it's like being in a loving, intimate relationship with the medicine.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see how things go in the upcoming years.
My husband, I know that was you and my husband would both say the same thing about that for sure. Because I know people try here. My husband says ayahuasca is like a blind date. You never know what you're gonna get. He's one time you're writhing in bliss, the next time you're writhing in agony. So you have to just expect that it's gonna be a blind date.
Yeah. What you were talking about is how I pretty much have come to approach the medicine every time. It's just, I absolutely have intentions, and I absolutely have the awareness to just let the medicine be as it is. It's not up to me. I can have all the intentions I want. If ayahuasca thinks I need to learn something that I'm not aware, here we go, kind of thing.
Correct.
And the last, like, so I go to Peru 5 times a year. And every time I'm there, I drink along with the rest of the participants, and we do 3 ceremonies every time. And I have absolutely experienced the notion of heaven, the notion of bliss. I wasn't that, although I really am. I didn't experience myself as being heaven, or I didn't experience myself as being bliss, but I could, I've had those experiences. The last time I did ayahuasca, it just slung me throughout the cosmos in a absolutely uncomfortable way. And usually when I have hard journeys and darker journeys, all along the way, there are checkpoints. Okay, these are the things that I can do to fix, to adjust, to build, to grow, and all this. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting my butt kicked, but I'm here to listen. This last time, it was just a melee of just getting slammed. And when I got out of the medicine, over the course of that week, I was just like, what am I supposed to do with this? You just beat the crap out of me. And we have this like really awesome relationship. What's going on? And what I found is a common thing is when those things are happening, it was like essentially what happened was like there was a hungry hippo that just went inside me and just grabbed all the stuff that I don't need, that I'm not even aware of, and just ripped it out of me. And I was like this feeling of emptiness and all this. And I'm sitting there talking to my integration coach, and they're like, they're just creating space, brother. Watch what happens. Maintain positivity, strength, vibrance, love, because you have this emptiness space that you have the ability to attract whatever you want to fill that space. So if you get angry, or if you're starting to fill this void with eating or drinking or whatever, that's what's going to fill that space. I literally catapulted from where I once was to a whole nother level of space to where I am now, because of that hard journey. We're cleaning out space, we're cleaning up shop. You need to level up now. And that was not comfortable, but it's something I'm grateful for. Hard journeys, I see, are amazing gifts.
I completely get that. I think that the universe went a little bit light on me, for lack of a better word, given that the first 38 years of my life were pretty challenging. So I think by the time I got introduced to plants, the plants are like, "You've done some pretty deep, like I've died, had near death experiences, had spiritual deaths, meditative deaths, everything that I think by the time I met medicines, we're going to give you a break on this one, but who knows? It can always change." And Diego, we're almost out of time here. I would love to hear any closing thoughts, and then where people can connect with you and find out more about your book and other things.
Closing thoughts. If you don't have visceral experience of what we're talking about, I think the best thing you can do is really challenge about who you are in the world around you. And if you can trade in the whole idea of knowing we're just curiosity, maybe there's something, I don't know, maybe there are things that I think that I understand that I don't really. If you can get comfortable in that space, the learning just opens up and you start to experience new things. It's something that just seems to be true and true. Where you can find me is thetridentapproach.com, all 3 words, the Yeah, our book, Leading from the Deep, our Navy SEAL Psychedelic Approach to Conscious Leadership, is on Amazon. And yeah, we do keynotes, we do individual coaching, we do team coaching, and we do Navy SEAL leadership based training events. And then we have an event actually coming up November 2nd through the 8th in Peru, ayahuasca for leaders. So in addition to the healing, in addition to the learning, in addition to the experience, then at the end of that, we tie a lot of the integration steps into how can this apply to how I lead my teams. And then, of course, also we share the best of what we learn in the SEAL teams, hopefully providing a fuller spectrum approach to leading. Yeah. So that's.
Thank you, Diego. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for so candidly sharing your journey. And from the bottom of my heart, Diego, thank you for being a best friend, for going out there and giving up your personal freedoms to protect others, greater good. My grandfather, others of you who have listened to this show may have heard me say this, that my grandfather was my best friend and my hero growing up. He was, when people say who was your hero, hands down, it was my grandpa. He was in the Marine Corps for over 20 years, captain, shot down the most times ever and survived in the Vietnam War, I think, and had a Purple Heart for it. And so veterans have such a special place in my heart. In fact, that's how we came to create. This has been Justin Nahama and I who mutually introduced us. How he and I had a special bond as Justin, as well as ex-Marine Corps, so Semper Fi to both of you. And at the time, we began testing our algorithm for matching by gifting sessions to veterans with therapists who they met with. And it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. I look forward to being able to do more of that in the future because I remember I was on a call. I was in Hawaii at the time, and one veteran we had gifted a session to, I'm talking to him. And it's New Year's Day of 2022. And he says, Jennifer, 20 years of anger management therapy and years of therapists and all sorts of different things. And one session did more for me than 20 years. And that's the power. That was more of like an energy session. And so whether you're looking at psychedelic medicine, energy healing, transformation of your consciousness, however you choose to take that on, I invite you to be an open, receptive vessel to whatever wants to breathe through you. Because when we're just this little speck of Diego or Jennifer living our finite lives, trying to look out there for validation, it's a very small existence. And when we realize we are only a drop of sand in the infinity of consciousness and potential, then from there, everything becomes possible. And that to me is what you've shared with us today, Diego. So that is my wish for each and every one of you out there. May you experience the vastness and infinite possibility of who you could be. And no matter how you choose to go on that journey, whether it's inner work, doing deep meditation, mindfulness, doing plant medicine, I invite you to come on this journey to expand your consciousness and to see what lays beyond. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.